We're here with Buffalo Bills Wall of Fame legend and special teams legend, and now current day talk show host, Steve Tasker. Steve, as long as you don't mind, we're going to jump straight into the questions here.
Sure, go ahead. It's good to be
Here
here,
we go.
guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Ryan,
thanks for being on.
yeah.
Uh, First, you've been a player, reporter, commentator, an actor. I mean, the list goes on and on, but what has been your favorite job so far?
Well, nothing beats playing on a really good team.
Yeah.
There's nothing like it. It's a once in a lifetime experience, and to be to play at the highest level with a bunch of guys you love and respect, for a town that loves you back, and be successful doing it, and being able to contribute meaningfully. There's nothing like that. I mean, it's really a fulfilling way to do things. It's really a fulfilling way of life. Unfortunately, it's probably so good that it's for young men. Now I'm in my 60s now, and you just can't do it. It's a gift to be a part of a crew like I was part of, and like so many other guys in the league who've played in the league have been a part of. So there's nothing that holds a candle to play in front of a packed stadium for a really good team in a really big game, and being able to make a play or two and contribute and do some stuff, and to earn the love and respect of guys that you really have a lot of respect for. That's the fun part of it. And that's why so many guys, you'll make it their lifelong dream. You can see it when you can see it, and fans can feel it, how cool it is. So there's no question, being in that kind of environment on the field with those guys and on that team is the highlight.
I figured that would have been your answer, being a player for sure, but
Yeah, I mean, of course, it helps playing for a city like Buffalo that just adores their sports teams. So,
Sure.
yeah. So you had never played rugby before joining Northwestern's team your last year.
That's right.
If any, how much did that rugby experience contribute to your success on the football field?
I'll say this: I don't know if it contributed to it, but it certainly made it easier for me to stay. The environment was. This was a long time ago. This was in the mid '80s, 1980s. So it's 40 years ago, or more. And so, it the combine it was like the second year of the NFL combine, and I was not high a profile enough to be invited to the combine. So the way they did it back then was they would send scouts from Blesto or whatever team had a scout in the region. They would send that guy to the universities, and they would say, "Hey, our scout's going to be there on Tuesday. Can you get your guy? Can you have your guys there? We want this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, right?" So all of us seniors and guys coming out in the draft would come out, show up, and there'd be a guy there. And he'd set up his own little combine for us, and it would take an hour or whatever, and he would run us through drills and all that. So rugby helped me stay in shape because we didn't get any heads up. I mean, it was like it's like a Friday, and the guys in the football office would call us, and they'd say, "Hey, the scout from the Seahawks, or the scout from the Oilers, or the scout from the Jets, they're going to be here on Tuesday. They want to be here at like 11 o'clock on Tuesday." And I was like, "Okay," so you had to be ready on Tuesday. And so rugby and playing rugby and practicing and doing all that kept me a little bit sharper. I was still working out at the university, but also keeping my ball skills a bit alive and competitive, and staying flexible and practicing it and stuff. It helped. It helped. But yeah, I enjoyed the time in rugby because we went out and played I only played like 7, 8, 9 matches for the university. That was kind of the season. And we got second in the Big Ten tournament that year. And it was fun. It was fun. I was most valuable back at the Big Ten tournament that year. We lost to the Illinois Illini. We had like 25 or 30 guys on our squad. They had like 90, because it was a big school. It was a blast, absolute blast. The subculture of rugby, I would encourage more people to be a part of it. And it's a rough and tumble sport, but the words with rugby and the way that rugby was described to me is pretty accurate. It was a savage game played by gentlemen. Soccer is a gentleman's game played by savages.
yeah.
And that's the difference in rugby. Rugby is it's a brutal physical sport. But the guys who play it have a lot of respect for each other. And I really I really gravitated towards that, and it was a lot of fun in my time there. Yeah.
So what you're saying is maybe in another universe, Steve Tasker's a world famous rugby star.
I don't know. I mean, I, I don't know, because here's the thing: rugby in America is played by. It's kind of a little bit like a beer league kind of thing. There are some really good players, no question. But you think about other countries in the world who have 50 or 75 million people in their country, and the best athletes play rugby. There's some pretty good dudes in those leagues, big, strong, athletic. And there's some cultures who, every sport has its countries and regions of the globe where they're very high profile, and the regions where rugby is high profile, they turn out some pretty good dudes. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
But
know if you know.
I don't know if I'd changed it if I had the choice.
I don't know if you know anything about Bonnie's sports, but rugby is huge here. We've got guys who come
Oh,
like
really?
international to come play rugby, and like a couple of years ago, I think we won like nationally, but I don't
Awesome.
know at what level, but it's huge here. Yeah,
It's fun, and it's a great game. It's a great game to spectate with as well.
yeah. I mean, we've really just had to learn it really quick because it's huge here.
Yeah.
My next question here, obviously, you've seen a lot of Bills, either whether they're on your team or nowadays where you're watching them on TV, but who would you say if there's one player you had to pick out that was the best you've ever watched or ever played with?
There's a couple. If you take positionally, been a bunch of them. Certainly, Josh is off the charts. I mean, he's an elite athlete. He's an all timer. Um, he's on a Hall of Fame trajectory, and I mean, he's on his way to a first ballot.
Right.
And it's he's that kind of player. Um, the guys who have played here have been off and on. Yeah, Kyle Williams is going to be an all timer for this organization, for the kind of guy he was, and for the um, for the penance he paid of playing mostly in the drought, that kind of thing. There's a lot of years in there where there's some really good players. I think one of the other players that will never get the credit he deserves for being the kind of player he was is Eric Moulds. Um, he was literally a Hall of Fame caliber player who played for an organization that wasn't in a position during the time he played um, to be relevant.
Right.
But Eric Moulds is an all timer, just an absolute all timer. Um, that's a guy that, under different circumstances, would be a household name for a lot of franchises. Um, guys like that, there are guys like that. Ted Washington was a guy I played with who was played on a number of different teams, won a world championship with New England after he left Buffalo, was a first-round draft pick of the 49ers and played in Denver, played in Buffalo. He was a really special athlete. Certainly a Hall of Fame caliber player, but he doesn't get consideration for the Hall of Fame because his statistics are not accurate, or not what Hall of Fame voters look for in a Hall of Fame player. He doesn't have any sacks, or very few sacks.
Right.
But you couldn't run the ball on any defense that he was playing on. He was maybe the best run stuffer in all of pro football history. But unfortunately, that doesn't make for eye-popping stats, and he's victimized by that a little bit. But I would say that Josh, Ted Washington, Eric Moulds would be at the top of my list. And for Bills fans, probably Kyle Williams.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of players that played for Buffalo during the drought maybe don't get the credit they deserve for playing as well as they did in those circumstances. And Eric Moulds he was somebody I looked up to growing up. So yeah, love to hear that.
Yeah.
So you've worked with Gus Johnson on numerous occasions over your broadcasting career. Gus Johnson's kind of a legend on the internet for his, how energetic he is. What was it like to work with a figure like Gus?
I did Gus and I broke into the NFL together with CBS Sports back in 1988. We did our first games together, and I knew very quickly that Gus was an absolute rock star. I still consider Gus a good friend, a close friend. Now, he went to the Big Ten Network, and I don't see him too much anymore. We don't keep touch, but man, I love the guy. I owe Gus a lot. He was a sweetheart to work with. I loved him. I still love him. I consider him a close friend, and I wished him nothing but the best. And I was always in his ear, when his contract was this, and I stayed with him when he was just getting started. And it's a hard road in NFL play-by-play because there are so many prominent voices, and particularly for a network like CBS, who has a history and a heritage of being, the Tiffany Network. Back in the day, they were known as the Tiffany Network. So you were on. It was like it was Don Criqui, it was Dick Enberg, it was all these. It's Jim Nance to this day, Kevin Harlan, Ian Eagle. There's some guys, some prominent play-by-play voices. So there really feels like for the guys down the line who are just getting started, like Gus was at that time, there's a real sense of, there's kind of a glass ceiling there. There's no way to go. You're not going to get, like, for instance, in a year like this, you're not going to get the Chiefs and the Bills game ever. You're always getting the Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars. And in a year like this, where the teams that are struggling to play, and we're getting a 2% of the national audience, or 1% of the national audience in our coverage. We're doing games like that. And Gus, there's no question, Gus deserved better games than that. And he knew it. And so that's really what led to him leaving CBS. And also, the fact that same thing in the NCAA tournament when we were CBS. He would do some games, and he was absolute money on NCAA basketball. I mean, the guy was fantastic. I mean, it was entertainment to watch. And I don't care if it was Valparaiso and Pepperdine. I mean, he was knocking it out of the park.
Yeah.
And so you knew, and I knew, and I don't know if Gus believed it until it happened. I knew Gus was going to be an icon in the play-by-play industry. Because everything he did was real. He never conjured up anything. He never made a thing. He wasn't a persona. He wasn't a voice. He was himself on his play-by-play. Still is. Gus is who he is he is a cheerleader and an enthusiastic fan, and he's knowledgeable, and he is just all about it. And so that's why, Gus was a gift to me. It was a gift and a pleasure to work with him. And I can't say enough good things about him. He was just fantastic. He's talented, he's just got a talent, and he has maximized it to the greatest extreme. So it was a pleasure to see him do that and work with him, particularly early in our careers.
Yeah, I mean, I know for us at least, he's one of the people like we look up to. We love listening to him.
Yeah.
He's one of the best. Yeah.
I could listen to him call paint dry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got a gift. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I got a little bit of a cliche question here for you, but what is your most like memorable play? I mean, if you could go back and relive one play, one moment in your career, what would you go back to?
Oh, I don't know. I think I'll tell you, one of the things that meant to me, and it's funny too, because now it's become such a little bit of, when I went back, and there was a play I made in a Pro Bowl where, I was getting double teamed. I was the special teams player for the AFC, and the other guy was a guy named Elbert Shelley, who was a fantastic player, and had a really good stretch run for the Atlanta Falcons. He was a really good player. And then so I was playing in the AFC NFC Pro Bowl in Hawaii, and I went back and, you go back and watch it. It was a real game back then. We were so stupid. We didn't know that, what are they going to do? Cut us, right? So everybody was playing kind of hard, right? It wasn't like a playoff game, but it was a game. And so during one of the plays, I go out to cover a punt, and I get double teamed. And the two guys double team me is this guy, Albert Shelley, and then Deion Sanders is his mate. And so I'm trying to cover a kick against two really gifted guys. And so Deion could run circles around me. He was an elite athlete. He was an elite athlete in any sport you could possibly name. And Albert Shelley was a grinding, hard-nosed top. He was a defensive back, so he's a gifted athlete. So I'm trying to work against these two guys that are deep, that are double teaming me. So I get up and I'm running down, and certainly Dion's out ahead of me because he's just he's cruising. And he's got me walled to the outside. And I know Elbert Shelley is behind me. They've got me walled so I can't get to the returner on the inside of me. So I know that if because I can feel him and hear him, if I swim underneath Dion, I've got a chance to make the play. But I really kind of know that Elbert Shelley is going to light me up if I do. But I have to make the attempt because I got to stop the guy. So I swim underneath Dion, and a tenth of a second later, Albert Shelley knocks me over. And I remember thinking this as I'm down, if I don't get up and chase the guy, nobody else is used to covering. I'm here nobody else is going to make this play because it's the Pro Bowl, and these guys are all starters, superstars. Nobody covers punts on these rosters. I'm the only guy that's got experience doing it. They're just filling a role for the game. You've got guys like oh my gosh, these star players, Bruce Matthews, Mike Munchak, Howie Long, Marcus Allen, so all these guys are out there, and I'm thinking I got to get up and chase the guy. So I get up and chase the guy down the side. He comes down the sideline. I just came down, and I kind of catch him, and he slows up to make a cut back inside. And just then I catch up to him, and I punch the ball out from behind. It flies through the air right into the arms of our punter, and we get the ball right back. Making that play and putting that kind of effort out, and even in the game, I went back, I've watched it, it's been shown to me over the years. I remember this too. All the guys on that team who were great players, Hasselrig and Howie Long and all the guys really appreciated that effort that I did to make that play. And that's really what most players strive for in their careers. Certainly they want to get rich. Certainly they want to get famous. They want to win a Super Bowl. All of those, you list down the things that you get out of playing in pro football. But the thing, when it really comes down to it, when it's all said and done, when you walk away, you really want to have the respect of the guys you played with and played against. And a play like that, playing for a bunch of guys from all the other teams in the league, they appreciated that meant something to me, even though it was in a throwaway all-star game, Pro Bowl.
I mean, yeah, either way, I'm sure you know this, but you're still the only special teamer to win Pro Bowl MVP.
Yeah, but there has been a kick returner too. I think Desmond Howard won it as a kick returner too. But I'm the only special teams guy. Yeah.
Right, yeah. That's a huge accomplishment, whether it's the Pro Bowl. I mean, Pro Bowl back then was bigger. Yeah,
I got it because the game went into overtime. And so they had, I think it was, I can't remember. I think it was Mitchell who was their return guy. And they put Dion in overtime. They put Dion back to return the kickoff in overtime. Dion was an all world, all elite, all timer. So they put him back there to return the kickoff, and I tackled him on the kickoff in overtime. So it was, and I blocked a field goal in that game too. So I forced that fumble on that punt. I blocked a field goal in that game, and we returned it for a touchdown. And then I made the tackle on the kickoff in overtime to put him back and gave us a chance to win. So those three plays back then was what made me the MVP. So it was kind of cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen so many clips of people talking about how hard Sean Taylor would hit people during the Pro Bowl, how hard everybody was trying to win this car, and so they were all trying to play their hearts out. So
yeah, they stopped giving the car as MVP just before I got it, and it was out. They didn't give a car away, and after that until a few years later. Then they started doing it again. But they used to get a car, and then of course when I got it, they didn't get that. And when Bruce, there were three Bills. Me, Jim, and Bruce won the MVP 3 years in a row, and none of us got one because it was a different time.
Of course. Well, as someone who many consider to be the best special team player of all time, what are your thoughts on the new kickoff rules that were implemented this last season?
It'll evolve a little bit. Their techniques, ideas of what they want to happen on it, they'll get to a place where they'll have a chance. But I think as long as they can keep it from being a concussion machine, they're going to keep it the way it is. And I will say this too: at least after 1 year, it makes it even harder to contribute meaningfully as a special teams player. It's really hard to do because there's no surprises, there's no overloads, there's no alignments that you can tinker with to give you an edge. And that being said, it's going to be really difficult for players to make an incredible play. Mostly now you see big plays in special teams come because of a catastrophic mistake. And there's a difference there. So, yeah, that's I think that the current mode and where they are, and this kickoff thing, I still think we're a little bit away from where it's going to eventually settle into. But it's more and more difficult to contribute on special teams.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, like we'll never see someone like Pat McAfee like kick the ball and recover his own onside kick and surprise
Right.
everybody and stuff like that. So
Right.
yeah, they'll definitely be different.
Yeah, I mean, if it's better for the players, I guess their health and stuff, there's nothing you can really say. But I'm transitioning just from playing football to reporting and commenting on football. What's been the hardest thing? What was the hardest thing when you went from being a player on the field to being a fan, kind of on the sideline reporting on it?
Well, to say it was hard, it's a little bit of an overstatement.
Okay.
It's hard going out and playing, and that's harder.
Right.
I think the thing I noticed the most about becoming a broadcaster was that, and my first game was a Bills game as an analyst in the booth with Gus. The first thing I remember about it was when the ball was kicked on opening kickoff and the ball was flying through the air and the Bills were playing and they were playing the San Diego Chargers, and it was Junior Seau and Ryan Leaf's first game as a quarterback, and Rob Johnson, Doug Flutie were at quarterback for the Bills. All four quarterbacks played in that game. When the ball went in the air for the first time since I'd started playing in the NFL, now I wasn't playing, the ball gets kicked, and I did not care who won.
Yeah, that's fair.
There was no pressure on me to play well. There was no stress. I just wanted to be a good game. That was the biggest transition for me, the fact that I didn't have a scoreboard anymore. And once you remove that from the equation, it opens your mind up to, as players, you think everybody has a hand in the game. You think the officials care who wins. You think the NFL cares who wins. You think everybody has something to say about the outcome of those games. And then when you're up in the booth and the ball gets in the air, you realize nobody does. The officials don't care who wins. They're just trying to get it right. The league doesn't care. They just want it to be competitive. And that's where you are as a broadcaster. You just want a great game so people want to watch. And it takes pressure off you.
Right.
What the thing you don't want as a broadcaster is a 63-4 to 7 game, right? You just don't want to have to sit there and talk about something that's no fun. And that mindset was the difference for me.
That's awesome. You kind of knocked out my question that I was going to ask. I was going to ask, how has your view of football changed as you've gone from player to analyst, and you kind of knocked that out? Yeah, that's something that I've experienced. Is I've in calling the small amount of games that I've called, they've kind of all been blowouts, and it's tough to try and do that.
Yeah, my view on football now is, excuse me, is the NFL's better than it's ever been. It evolves slowly but steadily over the years. It's a much different game than it was when I played 35 or 40 years ago. It was much different when I played than it was 35 or 40 years before that. The game evolves very, very deliberately. And it's the most well-run sports league on the planet. And sometimes they face issues like particularly with the spot of the ball this year, and the instant replay and the replay review and all of the things that they have faced over the years. They have faced it head on and been completely transparent about what they thought about it. And I think that has served them well. They do what's best. And I'll say this too, that they have kept it very clear about what their priorities are. And their priorities, and unlike like a sport like baseball, their priority, baseball is they consider their game sacred. They always have, and the game is very sacred. And how can we compare a guy like Barry Bonds to Babe Ruth? And well, we can do that because the game is the same as it was back then, and they're very caught up in the heritage and the past of what the game is. In football, there's none of that.
Right.
Their sacred cow is not the game. Their sacred cow is fan interest. How can we change our game in the smallest amount to keep people engaged with our game? How can we get them more interested in watching NFL football? And that has been a slight deviation. So the game has evolved, but very slowly. It's much different in this era than it was. That's why it's hard to compare the steel curtain of the 1970s with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Legion of Boom of the 2012s, or this Philadelphia Eagles team. All great defenses, but much different, and a much different era that they play in. The players and teams of the 1960s are very, very different than the teams of the 2020s. First of all, there was 36 guys on the team in 1960s. 36. Now there's 47. And now, when the rosters got big, then you had professional special teams players like me. And that's why the old timers, even when I played, were very down on a guy like me being considered for the Hall of Fame, because when they played, it was a throwaway down. They were just trying to get the ball at the other end. Right. Nobody was, and they had some guys who played really well on special teams who were stars, like Alan Page and guys like that who were Hall of Famers, who played, Deacon Jones, who played great on special teams because, it was a throwaway down. Right. You played hard on that, and everybody else was trying to catch a breather. Now you've got professional special teams players, and the game has evolved away from that because there's enough guys on game day that you got to give them something to do, and you want to maximize the guys on your roster to get the most out of every single play on the field. So when a punt comes or punt return comes, or field goal defense, kickoff return, you're trying to maximize those plays, those 20% of the plays in your favor. And that's something they didn't do back in the 1960s. They're just trying to get some field position and make sure the ball didn't get turned over back to the other team who's kicking it, that kind of stuff. So that my view on football is, because of that evolution, and even though it has devalued guys a little bit like me because it's kind of hamstrung because of player safety, what they can do, the game is still getting better and better year over year over year.
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely different football game than from even when you played. I mean, if Jim Kelly was running like Josh was, everybody would have thought he was crazy. I mean,
yeah, he wasn't protected. And you look, even when I played, if you look back as far as my teams are in the past now, if you look that far back from when I played, it was literally, the NFL was a half a step, not a full step, a half a step above a bar fight. It was brutal.
Yeah.
And those guys deserve a lot of credit for being able to play pro football in the environment that the game was back then.
Right. And especially with half the equipment, like helmets and stuff that we have now.
Yeah. It's amazing.
I got one final question here for you. So, I mean, we've mentioned it over and over now at this point, but you're one of the best, if not the best, special teams player of all time. But you originally came in as a receiver, a wide receiver. If you could go back, you keep the same amount of fame, everybody still knows who you are, but you could play receiver instead of special teamer, would you take receiver?
Well, if I could be an all-pro 5 times and a Pro Bowler 7 times and be on all the Super Bowl, yeah. Yeah. Because I'll tell you why. Because it's more fun to be on the field more.
Right.
And that's when I noted, when I finally did get to play some some wide receiver later in my career, it was more fun to be on the field more. You know, you just
Mhm.
got to play more. So yeah, that was much more fun. And certainly I had some success playing wide out at the time I played, and because I was still on a good team with a all time quarterback,
Right.
and I had a great relationship with him, and you know, and I knew the offense, and I had studied the offense during my time on the bench as a special teams player, you know. So yeah, I probably would have, because it just gives you a chance to help the guys on your team more if you can get on the field and play more. So sure, I mean, but I don't know that if I don't know if that's probably the only thing I'd change. Um, I mean, I love the guys that I played with, and I don't know that that would have made that big a difference to our team, and that we would have gone to 4 straight Super Bowls if I was playing wide out. Maybe, you know, we wouldn't have gone to any. Who knows? So if that was the only thing I changed, yeah, because I would have gotten to play a lot more than I did, and the conversation around my success wouldn't have centered around, you know, how many snaps I took, or you know, and or how weird it was for a guy like me to be famous
Right.
because of what I did.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all the questions we have for you. Thank you so much for taking the time and doing this. Really, really appreciate it. But
Ryan, Noah, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it. I appreciate you guys.
absolutely, anytime. Yeah. Thank you.